So hemp drying is a very important part of the process, but it's just that. It is a part. It is a part of the general supply chain. And while it's a very important part, it is just that, a part. And we definitely need to consider the steps that come before and after drying. So how we plan to harvest, and then how you plan to process as well. And the best way to do that would be to look at the bigger picture. So as I said, drying is one part of the supply chain, but it's just that. It is just a part. So we like to preach here at IEC Thermo continuous flow. And the reason we do that is because it's the fastest, most efficient way to pump through product, basically. So you're going to want to match your capacities to avoid any bottlenecks. So how fast are you able to harvest? How fast are you able to dry? How much capability do you have on the storage side? What is your extraction capacity? And then your sales as well. Really making sure that that is one seamlessly integrated system and there's no holds. You know, the last thing you want is for your product to move and stop and move and stop. You know, you want that continuous flow essentially from seed to sale. And the best way to do that is to plan for growth by being scalable. So keep in mind what your 1 year, 5 year, 10-year plan is as you're getting into this space. So are you making an investment that you will be comfortable with for a year? Or, you know, in the next couple of months, are you already at max capacity and wanting more room for growth, essentially? So really thinking through your entire plan, your entire process, and making sure you're giving yourself a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of room to grow. The last thing you want to do is max yourself out and be, you know, unsatisfied with where you're at.
Yeah, and I would just add that over time, you're going to find that just like any business, you know, your expenses, your cost of production are going to becoming really important. And so understanding how that all works together so that you can automate when possible and minimize labor whenever possible, and the amount of times that you end up touching things within the supply chain, that's really important also.
You're exactly right. And especially as the hemp industry grows, we're looking for less and less labor intensive ways of doing things. We're looking to automate as much as possible. You know, coming from cannabis, where Matthew and I are from, we had a lot of labor. You know, it was very labor intensive. We had a considerable staff, a considerable payroll. And in the hemp side, we're just moving too fast and the industry's growing too large for us to not be looking at the best ways to automate things and to make things easier, right? If you do a little bit more work on the front hand, set your business up, you know, it's working smarter, not necessarily harder. Don't get me wrong, hemp definitely takes a lot of hard work. But by being really smart and doing lots of research and really laying out your plan as granularly and as cemented as possible before you jump into this will help save you a lot of headaches along the way from what we've seen.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that you're not necessarily going to treat all parts of the plant the same. They don't all yield the same value, and the end products that you're trying to achieve are going to kind of have a lot to do with the process that you use to get there. So, you know, in adult use cannabis, where a lot of the times you're looking to put a smokable product, a bag ready, good looking product, you do have to put a lot of hand labor into that. But for an extraction product or for some of the other things that we're working towards, you really want to look at ways to minimize that.
And the best way to do that is to work backwards from what we've seen. So hemp is an incredible plant. You know, we've seen tons and tons of articles on what it can be used for and the potential it has, you know, anything from the fiber and herd side, you know, paper products, molded plastics, textiles, construction applications, to, you know, the CBD and cannabinoid side, which is more your medicines, your essential oils, you know, nutritional supplements, that type of stuff. So there's so many things that you can use this plant for. So the first thing I want you to do when you're getting into this space is to ask yourself, what is your finished product? You know, are you going for smokable flower? Are you going to make tinctures or topicals? Or are you looking exclusively at fiber, herd, or hemp oil? Or, you know, there's just a wide variety of products that can be made from hemp. So making sure you know what your finished end product is or what your goal to work towards is will help kind of fill in the rest. You know, so if you decide I'm going to do smokable flower, there's a very defined process to smokable flower. Same thing with CBD, CBN, CBG, all the different cannabinoids. There's a very defined process on how best to extract, with that being your end goal. So kind of working backwards and filling in the blanks will definitely help you to give yourself a little bit more clarity. You know, where are we going? And the next question is, how are you going to get there? You know, how are you going to get that product from your hemp plants? What type of processing or extraction or just process in general does your product need to go through to reach your end product? And then to go one more step in front of that, how much hemp do you need to grow to create this product? You know, are you growing not nearly enough for what you want to make at the end? Or are you growing way too much and having to cull as you go, or just kind of ditch product knowing that that's not going to make it into your final product? So just kind of thinking through the entire process before you put seeds in the ground.
Yeah, it'd be great. I mean, ideally, everybody would already have their crop sold before they planted it. We know that's not always realistic, but really understanding that you can't grow your way out of any problems in this industry. That we've already seen what happens when we have massive overproduction, and that prices have obviously come down quite a bit. So Sean and I have seen it a lot. I mean, farmers and growers do what they know how to do, and that tends to be producing more product. But if you don't have a place to sell it, then you're on the hook for the fertilizer, the cost of production, the labor, and everything that went into it. So it is really important to start with what your market is, how you're going to sell it, and then work backwards.
A lot of it too is because this market is very fluid. There's a lot of liquidity in this market because there's really only value in the final, you know, but there needs to be transactions through that process until you get to the final product. So I think that we're seeing that a little bit too as well, is that really factoring in your budget. And Matthew loves to talk about the planning fallacy, where everything takes 40% more money, more time, more effort than you originally planned. So definitely kind of factoring in a little bit of wiggle room and a little bit of get out of jail free card will help you a lot along the way too.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of reasons that last year was tough, but I think a lot of folks found themselves in a position where they really needed their harvest to produce enough cash flow to get them through the rest of the year, and that's become really difficult for a lot of people. So that's why it becomes even more important to think about things like stabilization, storage, you know, how to avoid just being part of that glut of the market that exists at harvest time. But again, it all goes back to having thought about what you're going to do with it before you put it in the ground.
Exactly. So we at IEC Thermo like to talk about striving for whole plant utilization. So everybody likes to talk about CBD, you know, CBD, CBD, CBD. That is only one molecule of this plant. You know what I mean? There are tons, there's over hundreds and hundreds more components of this plant that we're really only scratching the surface on. So by approaching your business with a tunnel vision mindset is incredibly crippling because, as Matthew said, you know, the plant doesn't hold the same value from the top to the bottom. So you can be focusing on different aspects of the plant, really looking for that whole plant utilization. So we've got some people that, for example, will harvest the top foot of their plant and process that for smokable. We'll have, you know, they'll come back through and combine the rest of the field and use that for CBD, CBN, CBG, any type of, you know, cannabinoid. And then they'll separate out their dry material and use their hurd and fiber for something else. So they're really maximizing every part of the plant instead of just laser focusing in on one tiny little molecule.
Yeah, and I think that we certainly at IEC Thermo have seen a lot this year that because CBD prices have come down quite a bit, there's a lot more interest in diversifying and looking beyond just that one molecule. So we're really excited about the potential out there to see hemp develop as real plastic filler material, like much more than what we see now. So there's, and that's what we think the next step is how do you make money off of all the different parts and have a supply chain and infrastructure in place that allows you to effectively process that so that you're able to sort out those different things and get the best extraction material to the extractors get the other products to somebody that can use them for some of the other products that are starting to develop.
Exactly. So going along that theme with planning ahead, so we want you to think about harvesting while you're planting. You know, everything you put into the ground, you will eventually have to take back out. So keeping that in mind as you're planting. So consider your row width. You know, are your rows 4 feet apart? Are they 2 feet apart? Are they 10 inches apart? What about your spacing? You know, are your plants 4 feet apart in their rows, or are they kind of piggybacking off of each other in a very densely planted area? You'll also want to consider, like I said, your plant density. All of these affect your anticipated weight per acre. Like I said, everything you put into the ground, you will need to take back out. So planning ahead and making sure your row width, for example, can accommodate a combine. Something like that is not something you would really think about as you're going, but that could be a big, oh, whoops, a big uh-oh as you go. So you can see in this top picture that it's very, very densely planted hemp. Chances are he had to lose some of that hemp to start harvesting, knowing there wasn't a row that he could go down. You see what I'm saying? So that density, he's probably cranking out quite a bit of weight per acre. You know, we've seen anything from 2,000 plants per acre all the way up to 10,000 plants per acre. A lot of people ask me, you know, what's an average weight per acre of biomass? And there are so many factors that go into that. It's almost impossible to give a direct number. So usually I will give typically a range, just to give people kind of an idea. But these are all factors that affect how you should harvest. So just some things to think about. You know, some of the equipment is pretty similar, the planters versus the harvesters, and there's a little bit of crossover there. But just kind of planning ahead, making sure all of your equipment will do exactly what you need it to do.
Yeah, and I would just add that, you know, we have seen a huge variation, and that variation has caused a lot of variations in how they're able to process it. Guys in moister climates with really densely planted stuff have found that it's really difficult to harvest and dry because it kind of it becomes seaweed, just a big swampy mess. And some of these things. So thinking ahead about that, you know, it seems good to get the most out of each acre, but if you're not going to be able to successfully harvest it and stabilize it, then you put a bunch of effort into something that you're not going to be able to use. And so, yeah, just that kind of foresight really can help pay off a lot when you're in that crunch to harvest.
And there's a couple other factors that affect this too. You know, giving your plants lots of space, you'll see less issues with powdery mildew, less issues with mold. There's a whole bunch of other, not consequences, but effects of really taking into consideration your plant width, spacing, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, in the indoor industry, a lot of what we try to create is a sort of a sea of green, but we spend a good amount of time removing a lot of foliage to help make sure that the airflow stays consistent through the bottom part because of what Shauna talked about, making sure that you don't become more susceptible to pests and things like powdery mildew and botrytis, which we do see quite a bit of out there. So, you know, contrary to what I've heard some people say, cannabis does have pests. Cannabis does need to have those pests managed. And so things like planting can help be part of that management.